Welcome to the Scared So What podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Grant Van Ulbrich. This is the show where we break through the fear of change and ask the question, scared? So what? Each week we dive into personal change management, coaching, and leadership for the future, giving you real-world tools, insights, and stories to help you lead yourself and others through transformation. Whether you're navigating change in your life, your career, or your organization, this is your space to learn, to grow, and to take bold action. So, are you ready? Let's move from fear to forward. Welcome to the Scared So What podcast show. Today I'm excited to have a special guest who is a dear friend. He's an ex-Oracle leader in Marketing Cloud, a co-founder of Sales TV, a fellow of the Institute of Sales Professionals, and he leads his own company at Supero, where he champions B2B organizations within sales leadership. Here, he maximizes his own methodology called the Conversation Operating System, a data-led framework that enables companies to predict pipeline and revenue growth with greater confidence. It's time to meet my friend, Mr. Alex Abbott. Hi, Alex. How are you today?
I'm very well. Great to be here.
Oh, it's good to have you on the show as well, too. I hope everything's going well.
It's going really well. I've realized one thing, though. I need to work on my podcast voice. You've clearly been working on yours.
Just deep breath and relax and just kind of let it go. There you are, right? So fun. Alex, tell everybody where you're at today.
Yeah, well, I'm in Portugal today in terms of where I am physically.
There you go. What part?
I'm down in the Algarve, in a town called Lolle, just 15 minutes north of Faro, the main airport down here.
Oh, how nice.
Yeah.
Is it nice and warm, or what's the weather like today?
It's about 33 degrees Celsius today.
That's warm.
Yeah.
And for those of overseas in America listening to the show, what is that? That's probably like close to the 90s, maybe somewhere in there, 80s, 90s.
I guess so.
Yeah, it's got to be warm. Got to be warm in the 30s, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, today it's finally sunny here in London, so it's been rainy all the past week, so I don't see a cloud in the sky so far, knock on wood, but it is England, so I'm sure by this afternoon will be very cloudy and something's going on. But it's great to have you on the show. For our listeners, can you tell us a little bit about you and your exciting career at Supero? You know, we've got Sales TV, ex-Oracle, you're running Supero Conversation Operating System. Tell us a little bit about what you do.
Yeah, well, I guess just for context, I've spent 30 years or so in sales. First 7 years in sort of B2C sales. So, so selling to Mr. and Mrs. in their home back in the day in the 90s. But it was around the year 2000 that I finally broke into business to business sales. And thought, wow, I'd finally made it, and then realized how difficult it was to do. Learning how to sell technology and services to multiple stakeholders. Far more challenging than selling to Mr. or Mrs. in the home back then. So anyway, I guess fast forward to 2020, I'd had a long career within corporate, as you mentioned, Oracle. Almost 10 years within Oracle, if you count the time that I was at a business that Oracle acquired. But really had a successful career, I guess. It had its challenges, its ups and its downs. But if I look back, I would say having the opportunity to relocate my family to Australia and sell into the APAC market, relocate again to the Middle East, Dubai, to sell into, Eastern Europe, Middle East, Africa, and then sort of finishing that stage in my career with Oracle running a sales team in Europe in 2020. I look back and think, well, actually, I had a pretty successful and eventful career, and it really helped grow my family and, my sons, who had the opportunity to live in different countries.
I was going to say, what a journey. I don't think anybody's going to be crying for you traveling around the world, seeing all of those great places and the experiences that you had. That sounds incredible.
Yeah, no, it it's amazing. Very, very lucky. But yeah, if we sort of bring it to today, leaving Oracle in 2020, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, other than thinking, well, I've spent so long in sales. I want to figure out a way to solve some of the biggest challenges that organizations, sales teams, salespeople, have. And initially, I wasn't sure how to really take the knowledge from my head and package it up into services. So I ended up providing sales as a service to technology companies. And that gave two of my sons, an opportunity to work with me, Jordan and Jensen. And, they were both on furlough at the time because of COVID. And so it gave them an opportunity whilst, they weren't working, doing their regular jobs, to learn a new skill. And that was sales. And so, it was a great time. We really sort of set off on our mission in that first year, having won several retained clients, but there was one pressing challenge, and that was that we were in this inflection point, and the difference between kind of buyer motion and seller motion, that gap was becoming wider, as buyers put up their zone of resistance, the harder sellers tried to penetrate it. And so I made a decision to switch from providing sales as a service to providing social selling training. We became a training company, not quite overnight, but quite quickly. And it was really an aha moment I had when I realized that actually the problem that salespeople are suffering with today is a lack of conversations with their target audience. And because people buy from people they know, like, and trust, if salespeople switched from bombarding their audience with sales insight, hoping that they would educate them and provocate, some interest, and actually revert to just being more genuine and authentic and developing their personal brand and activating their network and creating content that makes them stand out and look different, they'll actually encourage their audience to walk towards them.
Yeah.
So that was quite a big shift that we made. And I guess 3 years on, I've now developed that initial thinking into the conversation operating system methodology. We've been running a benchmark study to look at how, salespeople are responding, how they're performing when they follow this method. I've really looked at what was preventing organizations from operationalizing this approach, and fixed some of those challenges, measurement and targeting being one, and how they think about prioritizing accounts when adopting a social first approach, which for many companies they haven't figured out yet.
Which is so true. I mean, and I've worked with you as well, too, with our sales teams in the past on how do we get out of that product dump? You see it so much. The marketing machine puts out all of this material and says everybody share the exact same thing. But what you quickly have is people all over your sales organization putting out the exact same ad. And it's not authentic, right? People are not engaging with it.
Yeah. And they wonder why people aren't engaging with it. That's because it looks and sounds like everyone else.
Yeah.
And then the big thing that we changed, which is a nice segue into how we met, is personal change. And
there you go.
I realized that for any salesperson or any organization, change is hard. But when that change includes them putting themselves out there on social media in a way that they're not comfortable with, it's nigh on impossible for many people. And so, when I met you and I realized, learned the work that you were doing, it was another one of those aha moments that I had that I thought, wow, okay, so, for years as a sales leader, I've been trying to manage change through, clarity, providing clarity of message, coaching consistently, coaching to behaviors, And, whilst I was trying to replicate that as part of the conversation operating system, what I hadn't understood was the importance of really helping someone critically reflect on,
Mm-hmm.
the change that is happening to them,
Yeah.
so that they can make an informed decision about how they move forward in
Yeah.
a way that's comfortable to them. And for
Well,
everyone, it's different.
yeah, and I wanted to ask you about that. So you're right. We met quite a while ago. Actually, we met, I believe, through the Institute of Sales Professionals. We're both fellows there, and through I want to say Cranfield and Andy Hu. Is that correct?
Andy Huff, yeah,
Andy Huff. Huff. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, yeah. And we did sales TV together as well too. So you're
yeah.
right. And then you became certified in Scared So What. You took our certified instructor program. So how do you, or I'm not going to say how, but what was the impetus for you to actually then put it as a brand pillar within your offering?
Well, because I think because it was because the people I was teaching were
Hmm.
finding it so difficult to adapt and change. Uh, I guess there were a couple of things. One was they were so used to doing sales, and I'm doing air quotes here,
Hmm.
uh, in a traditional way.
Right.
This was something that was brand new. It was alien to them, and they often, felt uncomfortable
Yeah.
thinking about doing it in
Yeah.
that way.
let's
Wasn't
let,
traditional.
let's unpack that for our audience just for a second. When you say, and he's doing little air quotes looking at me here, which is kind of fun, but traditional sales. So I'm just going to help the listeners for a moment. This is a an allergic reaction for me. You go back to the 1980s, consultative sales, tips and tricks to manipulate the conversation. How do you overcome objections so that you can close? And we talk about contact center sales as well too, and their objective is to try the close 3 times. Don't listen to the voice of the customer. Actually, just close them. That's the revenue side of the business driving. Close the deal, close the deal. But we no longer live there.
Yeah.
That's 80s, 90s, and for organizations who haven't transformed their own ways of selling, this is where you come in with this brilliant, conversation operating system and social selling. And how do we actually change the game to where we're speaking with our customers, not to them, and we don't have our forced agenda. So I love that you're rightfully calling it out, saying salespeople have been programmed with a script for so long. How do you break that? And that's what you're doing right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess also having in mind this backdrop that, we came off of a decade of, let's say, growth marketing,
Yeah.
where companies would have this marketing engine that would produce reams of content to educate and nurture prospects to a point where then, business development might pick it up, business development as in BDRs or SDRs, sales development.
Hmm.
They might qualify and then hand over to sales who would manage the deals. And it's just not working anymore. That traditional linear funnel is broken.
Yeah.
And, there's a much higher need now for salespeople, leaders included, to build relationships, build rapport without looking at each person through the lens of a qualified opportunity. And
Yeah.
actually, you're going to have to do some work to build your visibility with those people that you want to do business with. You're going to have to build rapport over time, perhaps prior to having met them,
Yeah.
because they're stuck in this whirlwind of busyness, which is their day job, and they just don't have time to look at you. And so traditional marketing and sales insight is ignored. And so this is where the opportunity lies
Yeah.
for salespeople to learn how to build relationships at scale through social media, not through
Mhm.
broadcasting content, but actually behaving in a way that builds that rapport and that influence.
And it's so important too because I can already hear it now. The minute you said sales is evolving towards more organic relationships, I can hear so many companies right now saying, "Oh well, we do that. We're all about relationships. We care for our people," which is why you're still market heavy, market product focus driven. You're still all about your product, your service, yours. It's about the me syndrome. But yet you say you drive and develop and foster relationships. But what we fail to include is that a relationship is give and take. It's also allowing your customer in to see who you are. We've heard the term for centuries. People buy from people, right? It doesn't matter what your product or service is. If there's a need for that product or service, then people will find. They may not find it with you, but as you go through and build the relationships, how is it about them and co-creation, right? Co-creation of the discussion, which is, I know I've had deeper conversations with you about where change comes into play. So if you learn how to manage personal change for yourself, then all of a sudden you understand how to have a more empathetic conversation, a collaborative conversation, to where you're using, as a salesperson, you're using open-ended questions like a coach does to help your customer ideate. And I think that's what I'm getting from you is, even in social selling, the conversation operating system, which you're driving, is about the relationships. It's about bringing the voice of the customer in. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, it's, 100%. It's about bringing the voice of the customer in. It's thinking about, being more buyer-centric. Well, in fact, there's four key pillars. Let's call them skill pillars within the conversation operating system. One is personal brand development. In fact, let me take a bigger step back, because high level, there are four pillars. If we think a bit more strategically, of the conversation operating system, one is strategy, and having the right strategy, thinking about this or your buyers differently, so that you can adapt your approach and be more buyer centric. It's almost like flipping the traditional sales funnel on its head and thinking about each team member amplifying their own personal brand. And we'll come on to that in a minute. But strategy is the first pillar, and having a different strategy. The second is the skills. So if we boil it right down, it's boiled down to personal brand development, strategic networking that starts on social media, doesn't have to end on social media. It's content creation and storytelling. Storytelling is a really big part of that, and we can come back to that in a moment. The third pillar within the conversation operating system is, I'm labeling it systems, but it really is, it's a combination of targeting, it's measurement, and it's what are the systems that your teams are using to enable a more efficient, more effective way of implementing the conversation operating system. And then finally, that fourth pillar is personal change, as we've touched on. Now, coming back to your point, there's four behavior levers that each person or salesperson can pull once they've learned the conversation operating system skills. And that consists of personal brand development, engagement, which is really the way you show up. So if we think about personal brand as both a passive and an active thing, your passive social personal brand is kind of your social profiles and how you look from a static perspective when people come visit you, visit your profile. Could be before a meeting, could be after they've met you. But then you've got this active personal brand, which is how you engage, how you might show up, what you say. And that works in both the in-person real world as well as the digital world. And it's important that you show up consistently in both worlds. The content that you produce, we touched on storytelling, but a really big piece of this is how authentic and how human you are, because that's really the type of content that connects with other people, even your buyers. And then the fourth behavior lever is the influence. And so when you're pulling those other three levers, personal brand engagement content, you begin to grow your influence within the accounts in which you want to do business with. And that's why it's so important that targeting and measurement is a key component of the conversation operating system.
Incredible. I love that. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Gosh. And how's
Yeah.
that going with your customers that you're actually supporting outright right now? How are they embracing this?
Yeah. Fantastic. I mean, in a number of ways, what's been an incredible learning journey for me. If I look back at the last 3 years, we started off by simply providing ad hoc training, workshops and coaching in an effort to, implement a new set of skills and drive behavioral change. And then I've sort of optimized the approach over the last 3 years, as we were touching on earlier, in terms of, addressing measurement, addressing targeting, and how to read social signals and react effectively, personal change, and how to implement coaching, your method, into my one-to-one coaching with clients. And what we've seen is, as we seek to operationalize the approach, is a far more consistent and almost systematic approach to driving consistent performance improvement that starts with the conversation.
Yeah.
And so across our associates and clients, we measure some key data variables. So conversation creation is one of those things. So if you're pulling those 4 levers that I spoke about earlier effectively, pulling those 4 levers impacts the conversation rate the most. And conversation is really a call or a meeting. Could be in person, could be a Teams or a Zoom, but it's, you and your potential buyer having a conversation.
That exchange, that interaction together counts. Yeah.
Yeah, where you then have an opportunity to sell, because the selling isn't done in a message. It's really done when you're having a conversation with someone. And so when you've developed your personal brand on social media and you're showing up as this genuine, authentic person, this trusted advisor that's worth having a conversation with, it increases the chances of you having a conversation with your target audience. But more importantly, it influences the likelihood of that conversation progressing to a meaningful next step. And so, we're tracking conversation rates of anywhere between 3.5% and 13.5%, depending on the role and the seniority of the individual. And those call progression rates range from anywhere between 22 and 39%. And that's where the storytelling piece begins to be so important. If you imagine, content creation is one of the most difficult things for salespeople to do. And so I teach a storytelling format, or a series of formats, depending on where you might be in the sales process. So you might be using a rapport building storytelling format on social, but then when you're having a conversation with somebody, you want to be telling your personal story before you move into sharing.
That's part of building the relationship. You're allowing people in. You're expressing vulnerability and humanity so that people can actually relate to you versus just a sales pitcher. Because nobody wants to be sold to. I don't think I found a person yet in the world that says, "Yeah, sell me everything." We're just not there. It's actually, you're an interruption of my day. You're a distraction. Leave me alone is what we usually see. But what you're saying and what you're describing is how to actually bring yourself into the conversation so that you can track that conversation and the multiple ones that are happening and the exchanges, and how are you turning that into an opportunity to sell?
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. And having done multiple webinars actually with the ISP, with the Institute of Sales Professionals, the question I often ask the audience, who are typically salespeople and sales leaders, is, if you have an opportunity to speak with a prospect, would you rather tell them your personal story or a success story? And 70% of the audience will say a success story.
Yeah.
And when a salesperson jumps to telling a success story before they've swapped personal stories,
It's a turn off.
Exactly. The believability monitor drops through the floor.
I wish I had a little sound. Yeah. It just falls absolutely
if,
flat.
If you make the effort and take the time to develop your personal story with a business point, not any old personal
Well, and
story.
it's true because your sales success story is just that. It's yours. It has nothing to do with me as, general public buyer, today. If you're standing in front of me or you're talking to me on a call or whatever it may be, I don't need to know about all of your badges of honor that you have back on your wall. I actually want to know about you and what can you help with me in the relationship, because so many times we forget that it might not just be that first exchange to where I buy something from you. What if I want somebody to be there throughout the journey, not just this beyond the sale, right? So this reminds me of my doctorate, which I was doing, which is, how do you lead sales transformation, selling within and beyond the organization, right? And it's about the customer's journey as well, too. A customer doesn't always just want you to sell to them one time. They actually want you to stick with them through the journey. So after you've actually bought the product, et cetera, who do I have to call? You said this was such a huge success. Who do I have to call when I don't know how to deliver or to embed or to, embrace the CRM process that you just sold me? So it has to be more organic and the relationship has to be more genuine, which is what I think you're really driving here in the conversation operating system. And you've also incorporated personal change, as you've talked about that within this. You've made it a pillar of your offering. When you're having the conversation with the salesperson about their change, their ability to manage change, what's their reaction to you?
Yeah. Well, for the most part, I'm not always upfront about it. I'm assessing whether or not it really is an issue for them. And so, I've found a way of really just bringing in that almost like situational leadership, bringing in that coaching around personal change and your method when it's needed.
Good.
And
organic.
So, yeah, exactly. So, 20% of those going through my program will typically be off and running at the races. They're good. 10-20% just do not get it and are not comfortable, and that's okay. But then there's this, big tranche in the middle that will significantly benefit from the personal change coaching to help them find a way forward with this.
Wow. Well, listen, this is amazing. Thank you so much for sharing all of this. I'm really excited. I hope you'll come back with us to the explain just a little bit more about the conversation operating system, because there's just so much to unpack here, right?
Yeah, I would love to.
Oh, I'd love that. Well, listen, I can't believe that we're at the end of our session for today. But to learn more about Alex or to connect with him, please, I'll drop the link on his LinkedIn, and you can follow him and connect with him there. He's right there in Portugal. He's all over Europe as well, and he actually supports customers worldwide. So if you want to learn more, make sure you tune in and connect with Alex on LinkedIn. Alex, before we close out, just quickly, one last question we always ask: what is the one thing of advice you'd like to give out to people about change, coaching, leadership, or just life?
Wow, there's a question.
There you go. It's your choice.
Yeah, I think in a world, and I say a world, I'm really talking about business to business sales. In the business to business sales world, where 70% of salespeople, according to the Sales Health Alliance, are struggling with significantly high levels of stress and poor mental health. It often, outside of work stuff aside, thinking about the job and the stresses of the job, the number one thing that comes up for me regularly when talking to sales teams is this feeling of stress is as a result of not having enough meaningful conversations with their target audience.
Yeah.
So stop with the bombardment of insight until you've built rapport and trust with your audience. And that's where I can help.
Well, I think that's so powerful. We need to continue that on another show because, that higher rate of stress, and you see it all the time in burnout with salespeople as well too. People don't really, really understand the pressures of that career path. You have the pressures from the organization pushing on the salesperson to just close, close, close. But then you also have today's modern customer of how do you get in? I've experienced so many people, you have so many appointments set up and they just don't show up anymore. They don't even show up to the appointments or the calls, etc. It's just, it's a different world. And I think we can talk a lot more about that. And I love how you're doing this to let the salesperson actually have the conversation.
Yeah, I'd love to come back and talk about that some more.
Well, let's do that. It would be so nice to have you. Again, if you want to follow along with Alex, make sure you connect with him on LinkedIn. He's very live there. We've got a wealth of knowledge here. Alex, thanks so much for coming on the show today. What's your last word?
Thank you for having me, and apologies if you can hear my dog whining in the background.
Oh, no, we can't, but that's great. At least we're working from home. We've got our families and our animals. Thanks so much for joining us today. It's great to have you, and we will have you back. Thanks for joining us here on the Scared So What podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Grant Van Ulbrich. If you found any of this information insightful, well, give us a like and follow along. Make sure that you tune in each week for more episodes as we talk further about what is personal change, how do you manage it with Scared So What about coaching, and also leadership, and how all three of these tie together. If you'd like to learn more, then go to our website at www.scaredsowhat.com. Thanks so much for listening, and I hope that you come back soon.